Aurora knew something was wrong the moment she woke up. The house was too quiet. Not the ordinary kind of quiet, like when her parents slept late on Sundays or when her little brother, Liam, had finally passed out after crying too long. This was a hollow quiet, like the silence after someone slams a door and the sound disappears into the bones of the house. She rubbed her eyes, clutching the corner of her blanket, and whispered into the dim morning air, "Mom?" No answer. The shadows on the wall didn't move. The clock ticked, each second falling louder and heavier than the last. Aurora climbed out of bed and tiptoed into the hall, her bare feet pressing into the carpet like she was sneaking across thin ice. The hallway felt longer than it should, stretching like a tunnel. She passed the bathroom. Empty. Past her brother's room. The bed was rumpled, sheets tangled on the floor, but Liam wasn't there. "Dad?" Her voice cracked as she stepped into the kitchen. No clatter of dishes, no smell of coffee, no cereal bowls waiting on the counter. Just silence. The chairs at the table were pulled back in strange angles, as if everyone had left in a hurry. That's when Aurora saw the marks. On the floor, near the edge of the kitchen table, something like scratch lines dragged across the tiles. They weren't the kind a chair leg makes, they were deeper, almost gouges, with tiny trails of what looked like fuzz clinging to the edges. Dust. Aurora's throat tightened. She knew what had happened. She had known it all along, ever since she was 4 years old and first heard the muffled breathing under her bed at night. Nobody had believed her then. Some monsters hide under the bed. Now, it had finally crawled out. And it had taken them. Aurora spent the whole morning wandering through the empty house, opening closets, crawling under beds, checking the basement. Each room looked the same, lived in, but hollow, like the people inside had been erased. There weren't even shoes by the door. Just dust. She sat on the living room floor, hugging her knees, staring at the vent in the corner. Air pushed through it in tiny gusts, rattling, almost like a whisper. "You can't take me," she muttered under her breath. "You can't eat me too." But she knew she couldn't fight it alone. That's when she thought of him. The man next door. He wasn't like other neighbors. He didn't mow his lawn or wave when people passed. He only came out at night, always wearing dark clothes, always smoking. The other kids whispered he was a murderer, maybe even a hitman. Aurora had once seen him cleaning a knife on his back porch, the blade glinting under the moonlight like a promise. Most adults stayed away from him. But Aurora didn't feel scared. Monsters were real. Monsters stole her family. If he really was what they said, then maybe he was the only one who could help. By evening, Aurora worked up the courage. She crossed the small patch of dying grass that separated her house from his. The sun was sinking, the air smelled like rain, and the man's porch light flickered dimly, buzzing with moths. She climbed the 3 steps and knocked, her knuckles tiny against the wood. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the door cracked open. A single eye peered out, hard and sharp as glass. "What?" His voice was low, raspy. Aurora stood straighter, even though her knees were trembling. "I need to hire you," she said. The door opened wider. He was tall, his face pale in the porch light, his hair slicked back, his shoulders broad under a black jacket. He looked down at her like she was some strange insect. "You're the neighbor's kid," he muttered. "Aurora, right? Where are your parents?" Her lips quivered, but she forced the words out, "The monster under my bed ate them." For the first time, the man's face shifted, not in laughter, not in anger, but in something unreadable. Like he wasn't sure if she was crazy or if she had just spoken a truth too sharp to ignore. Aurora swallowed hard. "I have money," she added, holding up her little piggy bank. It was pink, with a chip in one ear. She shook it so the coins rattled. The man's eyes narrowed. Slowly, he opened the door all the way. The smell of smoke and gun oil wafted out. Behind him, the house was dark, cluttered with shadows. "You think I kill monsters?" he asked. Aurora nodded. "You kill people, don't you? Monsters are just worse people." For a long time, he didn't answer. Then, finally, he stepped aside. "Come in." Aurora clutched her piggy bank to her chest and crossed the threshold. Behind her, the night seemed to breathe. The man didn't bother to turn on the light. His house smelled faintly of cigarettes, oil, and something metallic beneath it all, like pennies rubbed between fingers. Aurora clutched her piggy bank and stepped carefully onto the worn carpet. The door clicked shut behind her. "Sit." His voice was an order, not a request. Aurora perched on the edge of a sagging armchair. The springs groaned beneath her weight. Around the room, she noticed strange things: black duffel bags lined up against the wall, their zippers half open, showing neat rows of ammunition. A stack of newspapers with missing faces on the covers. Knives, so many knives, laid out on a coffee table like a silver bouquet. "You don't look scared," he said finally, studying her. "I am scared." Aurora gripped her piggy bank tighter. "But I'm more scared of what's under my bed." His lips curled, not quite a smile. Kids make up things when they don't want to face the truth. Aurora leaned forward, her eyes wide, unblinking. "Do you think I don't know the difference between pretending and real? Pretending is fairy tales. Real is when your whole house goes quiet and your family disappears. Real is when there's dust in their footprints, like something swallowed them whole." Her words hung in the air. The man tilted his head. He'd heard wild stories before, confessions whispered at the wrong end of a gun, but this was different. Still, something gnawed at him. 3 nights ago, he'd spotted 2 men in dark coats parked across the street, watching his house. Professional. Patient. He'd lost track of them after midnight. Now Aurora was sitting here, saying her family had been taken. Not by men, she claims. By a monster. "You said it lives under your bed?" he asked. Aurora nodded. He rubbed his jaw. "And now it took your family?" "Yes. And it's waiting for me." Her voice trembled. "But I'm not stupid. I know what it wants next. That's why I came to you." For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, the rain began tapping against the windows, soft at first, then harder. The house seemed to breathe with it. Finally, he leaned back, reaching into his jacket. Aurora flinched when she saw the gun, but he only set it on the table, alongside the knives. "I don't do fairy tales," he said. "I deal with flesh and blood." "But," he paused, his eyes darkening. "I might owe you. Or at least your family." Aurora tilted her head, confused. "Why?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating the sharp angles of his face. Smoke curled upward, weaving like ghostly fingers toward the ceiling. "There's a chance," he muttered, "your parents didn't just vanish. If someone was coming after me, they might have hit the wrong house." Aurora frowned. "So, assassins?" "Something like that." She stared at him with a strange mix of hope and horror. "But what about the scratches on the floor? What about the dust?" He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time, he didn't see a child talking nonsense. He saw fear sharpened into certainty. He'd lived long enough to know when someone was lying, or when they believed too strongly in what they'd seen. "I'll check your house," he said finally. Aurora's heart leapt, but his voice cut her hope down a size. "If I find men, I deal with men. If I find nothing, you go back to bed and stop feeding your imagination." She wanted to argue, but instead she whispered, "And if you find the monster?" For the first time, his eyes softened. "Then I'll kill it." They crossed back to her house together, Aurora clutching his sleeve like a tether. The night was thick, the rain washing the street into black glass. His boots were silent despite his size. He carried nothing visible, but Aurora somehow knew he was armed to the teeth. The front door creaked open. Inside, the air was different now, stale, heavier, as though the house itself was holding its breath. "Stay behind me," he muttered. They moved through the rooms. Kitchen. Empty. Living room. Empty. He crouched by the scratches near the table, running a finger along them. His brow furrowed. Not claw marks, not exactly. More like something dragged across, something fibrous. He rubbed the residue between his fingers. Dust. Aurora shivered. "See," she whispered. "I told you." He didn't reply. Upstairs, they checked Liam's room. Sheets twisted. A stuffed rabbit on the floor, its button eye missing. Closet open, empty. Finally, they came to Aurora's room. The man paused at the threshold. Something was wrong with the air, colder here, like a draft rising from nowhere. He knelt, lifting the edge of her blanket. Aurora's breath hitched. Underneath, the darkness wasn't empty. It seemed to ripple, a pool of shifting black fuzz, tiny motes of dust swirling in shapes that almost looked like fingers reaching out. The man's hand hovered near his gun. Aurora clutched his sleeve tighter. "Do you believe me now?" she whispered. The shadows under the bed exhaled. And for the first time in years, the hitman felt fear. The shadows under Aurora's bed pulsed like a living lung. The hitman, his name, though she didn't know it yet, was Callum, kept perfectly still, crouched low with one hand hovering over the pistol at his side. Aurora pressed herself into his sleeve, her breath trembling. The air beneath the bed shifted again, and a faint, almost playful sound drifted out. It wasn't a growl. It wasn't even a hiss. It was the soft, airy sound of laughter, like someone blowing dust from a shelf. Aurora squeezed her eyes shut. "It talks," she whispered. "Sometimes it whispers to me at night. It says it's hungry." Callum didn't answer. He slid the safety off his pistol with a click so small it sounded like a cough. He'd seen men gutted alive, faces erased with blades, had broken bones with his own hands. He thought he knew fear. But this was something older, quieter. A predator you couldn't map out in flesh and blood. Then the bed shifted. Not much. Just an inch, a slow scrape across the floor as though invisible fingers had hooked beneath the frame. Dust sprayed outward in a faint gray cloud. Callum fired. The shot cracked through the room, deafening in the small space. The recoil jolted, the smell of gunpowder clashing with the musty air. But the darkness under the bed didn't bleed. It absorbed. The bullet disappeared soundlessly, like a stone sinking into water. Aurora's voice was a high, sharp whisper, "You can't kill it like that." The dust lung exhaled again, and Callum felt it, something brushing his cheek, like soft bristles. Not claws, not skin. Fibers. Threads. "Out," he ordered, dragging Aurora toward the door. They stumbled down the hallway, Aurora barefoot, Callum keeping the gun up. Behind them, the sound of something crawling began. Not footsteps, no weight. Just the hiss of fabric dragged across wood. Aurora's small hand tightened on his coat. "It doesn't like the light," she gasped. When Mom turned on the lamp once, it screamed. He swore under his breath. They reached the kitchen. He flicked the switch. The light above the table buzzed, and then popped, glass shattering as the bulb blew out. The room fell back into dimness. Aurora whimpered. Callum's instincts screamed that this wasn't a fight he understood. Monsters weren't real, yet here they were. But something else tugged at him, colder, sharper, assassins. He hadn't forgotten the men in coats. And if they'd come here, maybe this dust wasn't the only enemy. He had to think fast. He grabbed Aurora's chin, forcing her to look at him. Listen. If this thing's real, it doesn't just eat. It hunts. Which means it can be trapped. Everything leaves a trace. Everything bleeds. Aurora's eyes shimmered with tears, but she nodded. Behind them, the scratching sound grew louder. The dust wasn't just crawling anymore, it was spilling, a thin gray stream seeping down the stairs like smoke. It moved with intent, sliding toward them across the tile. Callum raised his pistol again, aiming at the floor. Move. They bolted out the back door. The rain outside had slowed, leaving the night thick with damp air. The streetlights flickered as though struggling to stay alive. Aurora's nightgown clung to her small frame as she sprinted beside him. Callum's boots splashed through puddles, his jaw locked, every nerve on fire. Across the street, he saw them. 2 men in black coats. Not dust. Not monsters. Human. They stood beneath a tree, smoking, the glow of their cigarettes dim beacons in the dark. Watching. Waiting. Callum froze, shielding Aurora behind him. The assassins hadn't moved yet, but he could feel their eyes. This wasn't coincidence. The thing inside the house shifted again, dust pressing against the windows like gray fog, eager to escape. Callum's mind raced. Monsters below. Men outside. No safe direction. Aurora tugged at him desperately. It's coming. I can feel it. Callum crouched low, his hand on her shoulder. Listen to me. Monsters are bad enough. But those men out there. They're worse. We move, we die. We stay, we die. Her lip trembled. So what do we do? For a moment, he almost laughed. A child asking a killer for a plan against nightmares. He took a long breath, eyes flicking between the shifting dust behind the windows and the assassin's silhouettes under the tree. Then he said the only thing that came to mind. We make the monsters fight each other. Back inside the house, the dust pushed harder, swelling, fibers writhing like worms. A shape was forming, a face without eyes, only sockets spilling black fuzz. The monster's voice whispered through the cracks. Hungry, still hungry. Aurora clung to Callum's hand, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure which she feared more, the killers outside, or the thing that had stolen her family. The rain stopped just before midnight, leaving the air heavy and metallic. Callum led Aurora into the garage, shutting the door with care. The place smelled of gasoline and mildew. Tools hung crooked on the wall, and an old lawnmower crouched in the corner like a rusted animal. Aurora sat on an overturned bucket, hugging her knees. Callum paced, his gun still loose in his grip, his mind turning like gears grinding on rust. 2 predators circled them, the assassins outside, patient and silent, and the dust thing inside, restless and hungry. We can't fight both, he muttered. Aurora looked up, her face pale in the weak moonlight filtering through a cracked window. You said, we make them fight each other. He stopped pacing. That's the only play we've got. How? Callum crouched in front of her. You said it wants you. That it whispers, that it took your family. That means it'll come again. It'll follow you. Aurora hugged herself tighter. You want to use me as bait. His eyes didn't flinch. You want to kill a monster. That's how it's done. For a moment, she hated him. Hated his calm, cold voice, hated that he could say it so easily. But she also understood. This wasn't a man who believed in bedtime stories. This was a man who had killed people for money. And if he believed in the thing under her bed now, it meant it was worse than even she feared. Finally, she whispered, okay. But if it eats me too, I'll haunt you forever. It was the first joke since her family vanished, and Callum almost smiled. Almost. The trap was simple, brutal, and cruel. Callum smashed the side window of the garage, loud enough to echo into the street. He wanted the assassins to hear. Then he pulled Aurora close, his voice low in her ear. "You walk into the kitchen. Let it show itself. I'll be close, right behind you. When the assassins come in, and they will, I'll make sure they see the thing first. Monsters or not, guns go off, chaos starts. That's when we find our window." Aurora's small fingers clutched the piggy bank she'd carried this whole time, as if coins could protect her. She nodded, but her stomach twisted. The garage door creaked as Callum pushed it open, letting them slip back into the damp night. The house loomed ahead, its windows faintly glowing with the gray shimmer of moving dust. Aurora's chest tightened. "It's awake. Good." Callum's tone was pure steel. Inside, the kitchen was darker than before. Dust drifted lazily in the air, motes catching what little light there was, as though the house itself had aged 100 years overnight. Aurora stepped onto the tile, her bare feet leaving tiny marks. "Hungry," the whisper came again, brushing her ears like cobwebs. Callum stood in the hall, pistol raised, his other hand tucked behind his back. A second gun, smaller, sat hidden against his wrist. His eyes flicked toward the front window. Any second now. The assassins moved like shadows. Two figures slipping from the tree, crossing the yard, approaching the door. Callum's heart didn't race, it slowed, every beat a cold, measured drum. Then the dust thickened. From under the table, it rose, not all at once, but in streams, threads, coils that twisted together. A shape built itself, long arms like ropes, a torso woven of gray fuzz, a head with a mouth that wasn't a mouth, just a black hollow pulling in air. Aurora whimpered. The assassins broke through the door. Wood splintered. Guns raised. "What the hell?" one of them choked out, staring at the dust creature as it turned. The monster screamed, not with sound, but with suction, an inhaling roar that dragged napkins, crumbs, even the edge of the table toward its endless hollow. The assassins fired. Bullets shredded through the creature, but like before, the dust swallowed them whole. No blood. No body. Just the whisper of more hunger. Chaos erupted. The monster surged forward, wrapping around one of the assassins, threads coiling into his mouth, nose, eyes. He gagged, choking as gray fibers filled his throat. His partner fired wildly, shouting curses, bullets ricocheting off walls. Callum pulled Aurora back against him, whispering, "Now." They darted toward the stairs, slipping past the firefight, but Aurora couldn't stop looking back. The assassin caught in the dust began to collapse inward, like his body was being unraveled from the inside out, clothes emptying of flesh, skin turning to gray powder that joined the creature's form. His scream cut off in silence. The monster was growing. Aurora pressed her face into Callum's chest, trying not to breathe. But she couldn't stop hearing it. The whispers weren't words anymore. They were her name. Aurora. Aurora, come home. At the top of the stairs, Callum pulled her into her bedroom. He shut the door, sliding a dresser in front of it. His face was pale, sweat dripping down his temple. "That thing," he muttered, "that wasn't just hunger. It knew." Aurora hugged the piggy bank so tightly it hurt. "It always knows. It whispers to me when I try to sleep. It told me once, it made me. It said I'm part of it." Her voice cracked on the last words. Callum's eyes hardened. He thought he'd been dragged into some child's nightmare. But now he wasn't so sure Aurora wasn't telling the darkest truth of all. Downstairs, the second assassin screamed. And the dust kept rising. The dresser against Aurora's door rattled like something was testing its weight from the other side. Callum gripped his gun tighter, eyes locked on the wood as if he could see through it. The muffled chaos downstairs was dying into silence, screams cut short, gunfire swallowed whole. Aurora curled on her bed, hugging her piggy bank. Her small chest rose and fell too fast. She was trembling, but not entirely from fear. Something else was happening. Something she couldn't explain. The whispers. They weren't muffled anymore. They were inside her head. Little spark, little thread, you are mine. Aurora clawed at her ears, shaking her head violently. Shut up. Shut up. Callum turned sharply. What are you hearing? She looked at him, eyes glassy, pupils dilated too wide. It's in me. Her voice was thin, cracking. It says it made me. It says I'm its daughter. The words twisted Callum's stomach in a way no bullet ever had. He had dealt with lies, paranoia, fear. He knew how minds could break under trauma. But what he saw now wasn't a breakdown. It was possession. Aurora's little hands opened. Dust clung to her palms, thick gray motes gathering like iron to a magnet. She gasped, horrified, but couldn't stop it. Fibers crawled up her arms like veins. No, she whispered. Not me. Not me too. Callum was already moving. He ripped a pillowcase from her bed and wrapped it around her hands, tying it tight with brutal efficiency. She flinched, but he snapped, "Don't fight me. If it can use you, we don't give it the chance." Tears streaked her cheeks. But what if I'm already gone? He knelt in front of her, gripping her shoulders hard. His voice was low, urgent. You're not gone. You're here. Flesh and blood. That thing, whatever it is, it wants you because you're not like it. Don't give it what it wants. For the first time, Aurora felt his hands tremble against her shoulders. Not from rage. From fear. The dresser groaned. Dust leaked through the cracks, tiny threads weaving between the drawers. Callum raised his gun and fired twice at the doorframe. The impact bought them seconds, but no more. The wood splintered as the gray fibers forced themselves in. We can't stay here, Callum muttered. It'll eat the whole damn house if it has to. Aurora's lips quivered. Where do we go? His mind worked fast. Fire. Smoke. That's how you clean dust. That's how you choke it. He grabbed the blanket from her bed and doused it with lighter fluid from his jacket pocket. Aurora didn't even question why he had it, she was beginning to understand what kind of man he really was. He flicked his lighter, the flame reflecting in his eyes. But before he could set the fire, Aurora spoke in a voice that wasn't fully hers anymore. It doesn't matter. Fire won't kill it. Callum froze, lighter hovering over the blanket. Don't let it speak through you. Her head tilted, her lips moving without her consent. I was here before fire. I was here before names. You can't burn dust. You can only breathe it. Callum slapped her, sharp enough to snap her out of the trance. Aurora gasped, clutching her cheek, but the whispering went quiet. His jaw clenched. Sorry, kid. But you needed to come back. They pushed into the hallway, smoke from his lighter catching on the blanket as he dragged it along the floor, leaving a burning trail. The flames spread fast, biting at the walls, chasing the dust back. But the dust wasn't afraid, it only shifted, curling into new shapes. Faces appeared in the smoke. Aurora's mother's face. Her father's. Her brother's. Aurora, the voices whispered in chorus. We're not gone. We're inside. Come with us. Aurora's knees buckled. Mom. Her voice cracked. Callum yanked her forward. It's lying. That's not them. That's bait. But she saw her brother's stuffed rabbit, the one from his room, lying at the foot of the stairs. Its missing button. I stared up at her. And when she reached for it, the dust surged. It wrapped around her legs in a sudden rush, lifting her from the ground. She screamed, kicking, the pillowcase tearing as fibers pressed through. Callum fired into the dust, each shot ringing like thunder, but the bullet sank uselessly. He grabbed Aurora's arm, pulling hard enough to wrench her shoulder. The whispers poured into her head again, "You are mine. You are my breath. My little spark of dust." Aurora's scream turned raw, animal. For a split second, Callum thought she was gone, swallowed whole like the others. But then her voice broke free, hoarse and defiant, "I'm not yours." And the piggy bank in her hand shattered against the wall. Coins burst across the floor like tiny suns, scattering the dust for a heartbeat. Callum dragged her up the stairs, toward the attic hatch. The only place left. Below them, the monster gathered itself again, larger now, the assassins' bodies woven into its shifting form. And it was coming. The attic smelled of rot and forgotten summers. Callum shoved Aurora through the hatch first, then hauled himself up, slamming the wooden panels shut beneath them. He dragged a heavy trunk over it, dust puffing into the stale air. The space was cramped, angled beams jutting like broken ribs. Old boxes leaned in piles, their labels long faded. A single small window let in a sliver of moonlight. Aurora sat hunched against the wall, hugging herself, trembling from head to toe. The sound below was worse than footsteps. It was dragging. The monster wasn't climbing the stairs. It was pulling the house apart, rising like a tide. Callum knelt, checking his last magazine of bullets. He knew they wouldn't matter, but it kept his hands busy. The girl's voice echoed in his head, it said, "I'm its daughter." He'd seen families destroyed before, but this was different. This was rot from the inside. "Tell me everything," he ordered. Aurora looked up, her eyes wide in the half-light. "About what?" "The voices. The dreams. When it started." She swallowed, clutching her knees. "Since I was little. Before Liam was born. At night, I'd hear it breathing under my bed. Sometimes it whispered words, but I couldn't understand. Other times, it would just laugh. And when I told Mom and Dad, they said it was nightmares. But," her voice cracked. "Sometimes I woke up with dust in my mouth. Like I'd been chewing it." Callum's jaw tightened. Aurora's fingers shook as she unwrapped her arms. The skin around her wrists where he'd tied the pillowcase was raw, and the rawness wasn't red. It was gray. Tiny threads of fuzz had risen from her flesh like hair. "I think it's inside me," she whispered. The whispering grew louder. Not just through the floorboards, inside the attic walls themselves. Dust poured from the seams in the wood, trickling like sand. It was building pressure, filling the house, and soon it would flood this space too. Callum pressed his pistol to his forehead, breathing hard. "Why you? Why your family?" Aurora shook her head violently. "It doesn't want them. It only wanted me. But they tried to protect me. That's why it took them." Tears streaked down her cheeks. It said, "They tasted wrong. But I don't." Callum's stomach turned. Monsters weren't real, he had told himself for years. But this wasn't a monster from stories. This was something older. And somehow, it had chosen this girl. The attic window rattled as if something pressed against it from outside. Callum spun, gun raised. But there was no face there. Only dust. Crawling across the glass in the shape of a hand. He muttered through clenched teeth, "We're boxed in." Aurora's voice came out low, shaking. "Maybe that's the point. It doesn't want to eat me. It wants to make me." The floor trembled. The trunk slid an inch across the hatch. Fibers snaked through the cracks, curling like curious fingers. Aurora clamped her hands over her ears as the voice pressed into her skull. "My daughter, my breath, little spark. You are the seed. You are what I left behind. Her scream was muffled into her knees. Callum grabbed her shoulders. Listen to me. That thing's lying. It wants you broken so it can take you. You fight it, you hear me? But even as he said it, the thought chewed at him. The monster hadn't attacked her directly. It had killed everyone else. But her. It waited. Watched. Whispered. Aurora lifted her head, tears glistening. What if it's true? What if I'm not even me? What if I'm just dust in a girl's shape? Callum stared at her, and for the first time, he didn't know what to say. He'd killed fathers, brothers, sons, but he'd never had to protect a child from herself. The hatch cracked. A long, slow creak. Dust sprayed upward as the boards bent. The trunk groaned, sliding further. Aurora gasped and pressed her hands to her head. The whispers weren't words now, they were memories. Her mother's laugh. Her father's voice reading bedtime stories. Liam's cries when he scraped his knee. But the voices twisted, overlapping, all ending in the same hiss. Come back to us, join us. Her piggy bank lay shattered in her lap, coins scattered across the floor. She picked one up, staring at her reflection in its dull surface. Her face shimmered, not solid, like the dust was inside her bones, waiting. I think I can feel them, she whispered. Mom, Dad, Liam. Inside the dust. Like they're not gone. Like they're part of it now. Callum swore under his breath. That's not them. That's the monster playing tricks. Aurora's head tilted, too slow. Her voice was quieter now, almost dreamy. But what if I want to believe it? Callum grabbed her face, forcing her to look at him. His voice cracked, the assassin's mask slipping. Then you're dead, kid. If you believe it, you're already gone. The trunk burst upward. Dust flooded the attic like a living tide. Aurora's mouth opened. And the dust answered. The attic was no longer an attic. The boards splintered, walls dissolved, and the air turned heavy with grit. Dust swarmed like locusts, devouring the corners until there was no ceiling, no floor, no walls, only a vast, endless dark where motes glowed like stars in a dying universe. Aurora stood in the center, her small figure drowned in the shifting haze. The coins from her piggy bank spun around her in midair, orbiting her like planets. Each reflected faces, her family's faces, eyes hollow, mouths whispering. Callum clutched his pistol, coughing as dust filled his lungs. He fired. Once. Twice. Bullets tore through the storm and vanished into nothing. The gun clicked empty. A laugh rose, rolling through the air like thunder. A laugh made of millions of tiny voices speaking at once. Little spark. At last, you stand between worlds. At last, you are mine. Aurora lifted her chin, and Callum's gut turned cold. Her pupils weren't black anymore. They were voids, swirling with drifting particles, galaxies of ash. Don't listen. Callum shouted over the roar. He stumbled toward her, boots slipping on a floor that wasn't there anymore, hands outstretched. Aurora. You're stronger than this thing. But she wasn't moving away. She wasn't moving at all. She stood still, her arms slowly opening, as if welcoming the storm. The voices of her family spun around her head. Aurora, it's safe here, come back to us. Sweetheart, don't fight anymore. We'll never leave you. Her lip trembled. Her small hands shook. And she whispered, I miss you so much. Callum's chest caved in. He had nothing left to fight with. No bullets. No knives. Just his words, and words had never saved anyone before. But he tried. They're gone, kid. That thing ate them, spat them into its belly, and now it's dressing up their voices to break you. He staggered closer, choking on dust. His throat burned, but he kept talking. You think they'd want this? You think your mom would want her little girl turned into a monster's mouthpiece? Aurora's tears floated off her cheeks, pulled into the air like pearls. She looked at him, really looked at him. And for a moment, she was just a girl again. Fragile. Lost. But then the storm screamed. The dust surged, wrapping around Callum's legs, pulling him backward into the dark. He dropped the useless pistol, clawing at the gray that slithered up his torso, into his mouth, his nose, suffocating him with the taste of rot and static. Aurora. His voice broke. And then, silence. The dust froze midair. The storm went still, as though waiting. Aurora lowered her arms. She turned slowly toward Callum, who was half buried in the swirling grains. Her voice was small, childlike, but carried with it a resonance that wasn't hers. What if it's true? She asked. What if I was never human at all? Callum spat grit, glaring up at her with bloodshot eyes. Then you fight anyway. Because if you give in, then there's nothing left. And I don't care what you are, I swore to protect you. Her expression flickered. Something inside her wavered. The storm shrieked in anger. You are not hers. You are not his. You are mine. My daughter. My dust. My breath. Aurora dropped to her knees, clutching her head, screaming. Dust poured from her mouth, her nose, her eyes. Her body shook like it was splitting apart. Callum, with one last desperate surge, ripped himself free from the swirling mass. He crawled toward her, his hands shaking, his vision tunneling. He wrapped his arms around her small, trembling body. Listen to me, kid, he whispered into her ear. If you are dust, then be dust that fights. Burn this thing from the inside out. Her scream cut off. Aurora's body went still in his arms. Then she inhaled. And the whole storm collapsed into her. The attic snapped back around them with a violent shudder. Boxes exploded, beams cracked, the single window burst inward with a howl of night wind. Dust streamed into her mouth like a river, filling her lungs, her veins, her bones. Callum tried to pull away, but her grip on him was iron. Her small hands dug into his jacket as she breathed in everything. The storm was gone. The monster was gone. Only Aurora remained. She looked up at him, her face pale, her eyes glowing faintly with swirling galaxies of gray. And she smiled. Thank you, Callum, she whispered. For bringing me home. He froze. His stomach dropped. Because her voice was layered, hers, and the monster's. The house collapsed around them, beams crashing, the floor splitting. Callum dragged her toward the window, coughing through the smoke and dust. He shoved the glass open, pushing her out onto the roof. But when he tried to climb through, she didn't move. She stood on the roof's edge, staring out over the quiet neighborhood. Do you hear it? She asked. He staggered beside her. Hear what? Aurora's smile widened, dust drifting from her lips. All the other children. All the other families. Sleeping. Waiting. Just like me. Callum's blood ran cold. Before he could grab her, Aurora leapt, not down, not falling, but dissolving. Her body burst into a cloud of shimmering gray that spread across the night sky like wildfire. The dust rode the wind, slipping under doors, through windows, across every home in sight. And from the darkness, the voices rose. Children laughing. Parents whispering. Beds creaking as shapes moved beneath them. Callum fell to his knees on the roof, choking on his own scream. The world was already gone. Aurora hadn't been saved. She'd been born.